Hello, everyone. Welcome to the final session of our data analysis course. So we've done SQL, we've also done Python separately. Now we are going to put them both together. That is SQL plus Python plus Pandas plus visualization. That's what this session is all about. Hence, by the end of today, you'll be able to pull data from a database using SQL, load it into Python, clean it, analyze it, and create charts all in one smooth workflow. This this is exactly how professional data analysts work every single day. So let's get right into it. Now, before we write any code, let me explain why this combination is so powerful. Here's the simple version. SQL is amazing at one thing, that is getting the right data from a database. It's fast, it's efficient, and it lets you filter, aggregate, and join data before it ever leaves the database. But SQL is not great at complex analysis. It's not great at statistical tests. It is not great at creating charts or machine learning codes. Python, on the other hand, is amazing at analysis, visualization, and statistics. But Python itself isn't great at pulling data from large databases efficiently. So what do? You use both. You use SQL to retrieve exactly the data you need. Then you use Python to analyze and visualize that data. You use each tool for what it does best. That's the secret. So we use Python to analyze and visualize the data. Then we use SQL to retrieve exactly the data we need. Let me show you how this works in code. We will start by connecting a database. First, we need to import the SQLite library. We need to import the SQLite library. So you don't need to install anything extra. Yeah, that's the SQLite 3 library. Now, we create a connection to our database. We create a connection to our database. And our database, let me remove this. Yes, so we connect our database here, our database for here. So this line opens a connection to a database file created this our database, which I've created from the previous sessions, which we've created from the previous session. If the file doesn't exist, SQL will create um, an empty database for you. So even if this were not to be there, when you run this, it will still create this database file for you, but it's just that the database will be empty. Think of this connection like a bridge between your Python code and your database. Everything you want to do with the database goes through this connection. One important note, if your database file is in a different folder, you will need to provide the full file path. So you just go to where the database is, copy the file path and provide the full file path. Now, I've only written this because our database is already in our project folder. If it had not been here, you would need to copy the entire file path of the database and paste it here instead of just the database basis name. Now that we have a connection, let's run some SQL. But before that, let's run this. We write our SQL query as strings. You can use triple quotes to write multi-line queries, which makes them much easier to read. So let's see. Let me head back to our VS Code. Let's say, sorry, let's write query. Yeah. Select everything from our database from this other thing where sales, get that done. 100. Let's so this is just a normal Python string over here. It's just a normal Python string. The SQL inside it can be anything you'd normally run in the database client. Like as I open the DB browser, you could as well run this in the DB browser. To actually run this query, we need a cursor. So a cursor is an object that lets you use SQL, that lets us execute SQL statements. So let's bring in the cursor here so we see. We need a cursor. To execute our SQL query. Then we fetch the results. Then we fetch the results, put it in a results variable. We fetch all the results. But honestly, this way is a little clunky. You get back a list of tuples and then you have to manually figure out which column is which. There's a better way and we are about to learn it. So let me show you guys the better way. This is the method you use almost every time. Instead of using a cursor and fetch, or we are going to load our SQL results directly into a Pandas data frame. First, make sure Pandas is imported. As you've already seen, Pandas is already imported here. Now watch this line. This is the magic. Um, uh, now that's it. So this PD, which is our pandas.read SQL query, takes two strings. It takes two strings. That is your SQL query as a string, which is this SQL query as a string, and your database connection, which is this. So it takes two strings. It takes two things, SQL query and your database connection. Just remember this SQL query is a string, a normal Python string. This is just a normal Python string. Now, it runs the query and fetches the results and loads them directly into a data frame called DF. This is the workhorse of Python SQL integration. So need to learn this line, remember it, and use it constantly so that you don't forget. Now your SQL results are a data frame, and everything you already know for Pandas applies. Okay, that's so. Okay. I don't know if you can see the error code, the error I'm receiving here. Okay, I think it was gonna. Yeah, it's because I placed double arrows here instead of a single one. Let's run this again and see. Uh, Sorry, we've not printed our. Yeah, we didn't print the database. Now we've printed it, and this is the result. This is the data in a database. You can see the columns, because the columns and the rows over here. Order ID, customer ID, employee ID, order date, sales, region, category. Yeah. Now, once your data is in a data frame, you can use all the pandas methods you've already learned in the previous sessions. So to see our first few rows instead of this entire data, we run our df.head as we talked about. So if we run this, yes, this should show us our first few rows. I'm sure you guys can see showing us our first few rows. Let me clear the terminal in so you guys can see what. So that is, we are trying to just see the first few rows of our database, the data in our database. So to see the last few rows, as we talked about in the previous sessions, we do df.tail. When we run it, it shows us the last few rows. Yeah, as you can see here, from 5 to 9. Now, to get basic information about each column, like data types and missing values, we do our df.info to get those details. When we run this, we should see the details of, yeah, so we can see the details. It's telling us that we have the total number of columns in this database is 7. Yeah, you can see the column names over here, their data types, and whether they are null and all of those. Now, to get the summary statistics for numerical columns or for numeric columns, we use our describe function, which is our df.describe. When we run this, if you see our summary, yes, so we can see our statistical summary of the entire database over here, of the column ID, customer ID, employer ID, sales, or the accounts, their mean, their um, all of them are here. Their quarters are also here. Their maximums are also here. So we can see all the statistical summaries over here. Now, everything you've learned about about Pandas exploration still works. So the only difference is that the data came from a database instead of a CSV file. In the previous sessions, you see that we were using CSV files, but now we are using actual databases. So that is the difference. Data from databases is often cleaner than data from CSV files, but it's really perfect. You still need to handle missing values. To see how many missing values are in each column, we use the is now function, which is our df.isNow then dot sum, so that it gives us a sum of the missing values. When you run this, df that is now, oh yeah, sorry, this is a function. When we run this, yes, so we can see that there are no missing values in any column over here. So, but if there were some missing values, to fill the missing value, we would have used this function down here. Let me write it down here so you can see. Let me make a duplicate of this. We are not going to print it though. Let me just write. So df dot fill the missing values. Then let's say we want to fill those values with 0. So fill missing values with 0 in place. In place true. So this is the code you use to fill in missing values if there were missing values in your database. The in place equals true part means modify the data frame directly instead of making a copy. So you just modify it directly instead of making another copy of the database. You can also drop rows with missing values. That is we've already talked about those ones too. The df.dropNow function. The dropNow function. We still have to put the in place true so that the command modifies the database directly instead of making a duplicate. So, but be careful with this drop now. If you drop every row that has any missing value, you might lose more data than you expect. You can also fill different columns with different values, but for now, the fill now is a good starting point. Now, remember group by from SQL, the one we did in the previous section. Pandas has its own version. Let's see you want total sales by region. So let me bring that in here. I want to print total sales by region. Let me clear our terminal first. Yeah. Yeah, that's group by region column, and sales. Since we are looking for the total sales, we need to sum them up. Yeah. So this does exactly what the SQL group by did. It splits the data by region, then calculates the sum of sales for each group. Let's run it and see for ourselves. Yeah, as we can see over here. So you can also do multiple aggregations at once. Sometimes it's easier to do the grouping in Pandas instead of SQL because you can experiment and tweak things more quickly in Python Pandas. Now, for the fun part, that is creating charts. First, we need to import our Matplotlib, which we've already imported here as PLT. Then let's create a bar chart. Let's create a bar chart. Let me take this off. So we want to create a bar chart of total sales by region. Let me leave this here for now. So our region sales, our region to sale is, so I can just copy everything here. Then we plot it. Region sales dot plot, but we want a bar chart. We want to plot a bar chart. We give it a title as total sales by region. We label the okay, let's label the x-axis. The x-axis is region. Yeah, let's see, let's label the y-axis, which is total sales. Now let's display this now. So we use our show function, our matplotlib.pyplot show function. And let's run this to see. Yeah, that's run, but I don't think you guys can see it. Let me make it visible for you guys. Yeah. So that is the result. That's the result over there. That's 4 lines of code, and you have a professional looking bar chart, just like that. We've converted that data into a bar chart professionally. You can see the regions here and the total sales here. For Ashanti region, you can see total sales hitting this area. Bono, less. The highest is Accra. We can all visualize this over here. You can also create other chart types by changing the kind parameter. So we can change, let me switch back to VS Code. So we can change this this kind parameter to, let's see, line and all those things. Hist, for histogram, scatter for scatter plots, and a whole lot. The key insight here is that the data came from a database via SQL, but the visualization came from Python. That's the power of combining these tools. Now, let me walk you through what a complete professional workflow looks like from start to finish. So, step one is to the step one is that you have a business question. For example, which product category had the highest sales last month? Then step two, you write a SQL query to get exactly the data you need. You filter to last month. You select the relevant columns. Maybe you do some aggregation. Then step three, you load that query into Pandas using pd.read SQL query. Step four, you explore and clean the data, check for missing values and fix data types if needed. Then step five, you analyze the data, group by category, calculate the totals, and then find the highest one. Step six, you visualize the results, create a bar chart or a line chart that tells the story clearly. Step seven, you present your insight to your manager or your team. So you see, every single step is connected. Database to SQL to Pandas to analysis to visualization to business insights. That's the complete pipeline. Let me give you let me give you a concrete real world example. Imagine your manager walks up to you and says, which region generated the highest revenue last quarter? Here's what you would do. First, write a query. Um, okay, let me give you an example in VS Code. So first, write a query. So from in our query side, we want to select uh, we really want to select the region, sorry, the region, then sum of all sales as total sales. Then we want to do that from the orders table where uh, all the data is greater of should be greater or equal to our order data is greater or equal to our order date. Sorry. Oh, our order date. So, because we need to find the last month. So our order date is greater or equal to, let's say, 2024 dash 01 dash 01. And our order date is less than 2024 dash 04 dash 01. And we are grouping by region. And we are ordering by total sales in a descending order. Yeah. So the second is when you're done with the query, the second is loading this into our pandas, which is already here, which we've done already. Then the third is to look at the result. So the third is simply to print this result We just simply print this. That's that. Yeah. We just simply print this. So the fourth thing to do is to create a simple chart using our data frame. We plot what kind of chart we want to plot. A bar chart. We want to plot a bar chart with X being the region and Y being the total sales. Then we show this as PLT.show display our results. So fit we walk over to your manager and say the North region had the highest revenue last quarter, which is total sales of say 1.2 million, or Accra has the highest revenue with total sales of 4 million, or whatever the result is, you tend to find out. So that is basically the job. That's what data analysts do every day. You just learned how to do this. So you've learned how to do this now. One very important thing I need to show you. When you are done working with databases, you must close the connections. So to close the connection, you use the that is the connection.close function. Yeah, you use the connection.close function. This is like turning off the lights when you leave the room. The phrase absolute everything prevents problems. If you forget to close your connection, it's not the end of the world. When your project script finishes running, the connection will usually be closed automatically. But it's a good habit to close it explicitly every time. The best practice is to use a try or finally block or a wait statement. But for now, just remember to call the fun.close function at the end of your work. So just remember to call this always at the close or at the end of your work. Now it's your turn to put everything together. Here's your final assignment. This is a mini project that covers everything you've learned. So step 1, write a SQL query that pulls data from a table. You can use the orders table, the customers table, or both with a join. Make sure you are pulling at least a few hundred rows. Then step 2, load the query into a Pandas data frame using pd.read SQL query. Then step 3, explore the data using the head function, the info function, and the describe function. Then write down one interesting thing you noticed. Then step 4, clean any missing values. That is, use the snow.sum function to find them. Then use the fill now or drop now to handle the missing values. Then step 5, perform at least one aggregation using the group by function. For example, total sales by category or average order value by region. Then the next step, which is step 6, create at least 2 charts using Matplotlib. A bar chart and a line chart or a bar chart and a histogram. Anything that helps tell the story of your data. Step 7, write down one business insight based on your analysis. One sentence that answers a question like, what should the business do differently? And the final step, which is step 8, close your database connection. That's it. That's the entire data analysis workflow in 8 steps. This is exactly how real analysts work. So take your time, experiment, and break things and fix them. You can do it. So congratulations. Congratulations again. You've just finished the data analysis course. So let me remind you what you learned this week. We learned SQL fundamentals, that is a select from where the basics, filtering data, using conditions to get exactly what you need. We also looked at aggregations and group by, that is summarizing millions of rows into simple answers. We also looked at joins and relationships, that is connecting multiple tables together. We looked at subqueries, putting queries inside other queries or putting a query inside another query. Then we we combine the Python and the SQL together. That is a complete professional workflow. So you now have one of the most valuable skill sets in the entire data industry. The ability to pull your own data from a database and analyze it in Python is not common. It makes you incredibly valuable. Now, before we wrap up completely, let me tell you what week 4 would have covered. So week 4 is designed as a self-guided capstone project. I'm giving you all the materials and you can complete it on your own time. Here's what week 4 includes. Section 11, which contains the guided capstone project, where you put everything you've learned into one complete project. You will follow a 5-step pipeline in this session, which is step 1, you load your data set into Pandas using pd.read CSV function. Then step 2, you clean the data, you handle the null values, you fix data types, and you remove duplicates. Then step 3, you export your data to SQLite or use Pandas to run SQL queries. Then write group by aggregations and practice some joins on your own. Then step 4, you perform exploratory data analysis. That is, you use the describe function, the correlation function, the value counts functions. You create a bar chart, line chart, scatter plot, or heat map, any of them. You create some of those. Then step 5, you present your findings. You write 5 bullet point insights. Explain what surprised you most or something of that sort. Then there is there's a complete skeleton provided. You will build on it live in your own Jupyter notebook. I'll provide you with it, so don't worry. Then the next section, which is the session 12, that is the wrap up careers and what's next session. So this session covers where you go from here. We look at the 3 core data careers, that is data analyst, which uses SQL, Python, dashboards, reports, and etc. And data scientist that uses machine learning, statistics, modeling, and research. and data engineer, which uses pipelines, cloud, SQL, and Spark. We also cover common beginner mistakes and how to avoid them. That is skipping EDA. You have to make sure you always explore before modeling. Also ignoring null values, um, misleading charts, correlation equals causation, no comments in codes, and a whole lot. Another one is also not sharing your work, like sharing on GitHub, LinkedIn, or the community you build your portfolio in. I also provided a 90-day post-course roadmap. That is from day one to 30. You consolidate, you redo the capstone with a new data set and set up a GitHub. Then day 31 to 60, you expand, learn Tableau or Power BI, you start Kaggle competitions. Step day 61 to day 90, you apply, you update your LinkedIn, you apply for internships or probably junior roles. So there are assignments for both sessions, including completing the full pipeline, writing your findings, providing charts, recording a walkthrough video, updating LinkedIn, and building your portfolio. All the resources are provided in the week 4 material. The dataset links, the code skeleton, the career guides, the recommended learning resources, everything. So here's what I want you to do. Complete week 4 on your own. Follow the capstone project step by step. Use the materials I've provided. Build your project. Share it with the community. Then the slides, the code, the assignments, the checklist, they are all there waiting for you. And when you finish, share your notebook in the YouTube community tab. Your work deserves to be seen, so you have to share them. Now, this brings us to the end of our time together. Let me say one last thing. You started this course with zero knowledge of data analysis, and now 4 weeks later, or whenever you finish the course, you have real marketable skills. You can write Python, you can manipulate data with Pandas, you can write SQL queries, you can join tables, you can aggregate data, you can create charts, you can combine SQL and Python into a complete workflow. That's huge. That's a career changing skill set. But here's the truth. This course is just the beginning. Data analysis is a skill. It improves every time you use it. The best next step is to start your next data set today. Pick something you are curious about. Could be sports, data, movie data, health data, anything. Run the pipeline, make mistakes, learn from them. A portfolio of real projects is worth more than any certificate alone. So thank you for sticking with me and thank you for doing the work. My name is Joshua Darrah and I'll see you around.